school and, you're showing your teacher the homework, as opposed to when the lady, I couldn't catch her name, but when she did it, it was more like she hears it and she makes it to be more of a conversation. So then I understood, well, like what you mean by the high impact questions. So that was kind of an eye opening. I think inherently I'm fundamentally so afraid to ask anything for the fear of, oh my God, you don't even know this, so that is something that holds me back, and I have to make a conscious effort to get away from that. So that's one. Regarding the case itself, I guess this was actually more of the key thing in this case was that the difference between fair trade, organic, and local. And that's something I actually missed. Because when I thought about it, I started thinking about the obvious. Oh yeah, bring the cost up, introduce new product. How about looking into tea, that kind of stuff, instead of like this one. I actually missed the point altogether until I went and looked at the solutions. That okay, I thought about it, but it's like, nah, that can't be it. If they're saying fair trade, they must obviously have already filtered the others out. But that's the problem. You can't take it for granted.
Right.
So,
right.
and I know I do have a tendency to, it's like, no, come on, this is too obvious. It won't be that way. So sometimes, as you said, like keep it simple. So those were some of the observations off the top of my head.
So I think you're taking away the right things. So first, on this idea of asking questions, you have to ask questions.
Yes.
So, I'll just give you a simple example. I had a conference call on Wednesday with two colleagues at a company that I do some training for, and they want a summer training for a program. And they had said to me, we think we'd like a training on this topic, but we're open to some other ideas, right? So the first thing I said when I got onto the call with them was, what are some of your business objectives? And the two of them talk for, 5 minutes. And then I said, well, what else is really important with, this day that you guys are training? They're like, well, the afternoon is kind of this, and it's going to be sort of individual, and we really need something maybe in the morning, kind of collaborative, and all of a sudden the idea that they had proposed for the training was completely the wrong idea.
I see.
And so I had, 3 other options in my arsenal, and said to them, well, let me give you these 3 other options, and we can kind of talk about how each of them fits. Right? So if I had just, basically said, well, why don't I tell you about my ideas? I would have had no idea how they fit.
I see. Yeah. Good point.
So in this world, don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
Because in the consulting world, inquiry, asking questions is one of the highest level competencies. And it's not about knowledge and expertise. Because sometimes you might ask a question and the intention is to have the executive say, well, shit, I don't know. Right? You ask kind of a dumb question, let me ask a dumb question.
Yeah.
Do we really understand, the migration of our, customer preferences? And has anybody ever really, we talked to our customers lately? And it's like, oh shit, no, we haven't really done that.
Yeah.
So don't have that fear. And then I think the second thing, the same thing goes, and you said it well, don't make assumptions about the case. Learn about what's needed by way of gathering evidence. And that, even the simplest cases have something hidden that is there to be discovered.
Exactly. Like in this particular case where, there was just that one line it was important enough to be part of the three-line description that the company, Good Life, their executives are considered to be industry experts.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept thinking like that has to mean something. And
Mm-hmm.
then the in the video that you had, where it was when she enunciated very clearly that, well, they're already speaking and they're doing it, as charter and goodwill of the company to promote. But then shit, why don't we just start charging for it?
Yeah.
Go to conferences and speak. Like, but maybe that was the intention, saying that, yeah, we have all these
Mhm.
in-house experts. Why are we giving our expertise away for free?
That's right. That's
But when I thought of it, it would be like, yeah, I could say, yeah, you're speaking certificate, but that goes against the company's charter. So maybe I shouldn't say that. So it's basically, as I said, I have to overcome the inhibitions of, okay, if it's there, if it's important enough that it's presented at the beginning, then I have to find a way to make use of that fact.
right.
I
Mm-hmm.
cannot ignore it.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like this idea, like go big or don't go at all,
Yep, exactly.
and conservatism in business in general, right? You do this in your job. You're
Yeah.
you're trying to push big ideas and
Mm.
innovation and big impacts and all that stuff. The only dimension that you really need to add to it is, well, look, if we're going to do this, this isn't going to be easy. This is going to be hard.
Yep.
And it might not be accepted, but it still should be something that we think about.
Yes.
So it's the idea, but then it's backing it up with a little bit of the
Yeah.
pragmatism.
Yeah. Because frankly, in this particular case, the ideas were not like huge. The ideas to increase
Mm-mm.
revenue were not huge. They
Mm-mm.
were just, okay, why don't we have our executives start to charge like, you know, price for speaking, number
Yeah.
one, then, or why don't we add new products?
Yeah.
Like, okay, we have already added 10 new products, add a couple more. Or,
Yep.
they were not like huge ideas to improve the revenue.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Like, okay, so, but I get that, okay, sometimes, it can't be, you can't pitch here that, why don't they make fair trade burgers?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
when she said about like, hey, have like, take the coffee and the cocoa and the sugar and make a baking mix and fair trade cake. I'm literally
Yeah.
sitting there rolling my eyes, going, come on, if I'm the CEO and they're telling me to make fair trade cake that I'll feel right serving at my next dinner party, like, F you, that's just stupid. But hey, maybe people want that shit. No offense.
Right. 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 Well, and so the real world is fascinating. Um, I think a lot about this. I had a client one time, and it's a company right now that still exists, but they're limping along. And they were a retail store that sold, music, DVDs, videos, video games, right? And with iTunes and iPods and all that stuff, that this company basically collapsed, right?
Mhm.
One of the things we told them that they would never execute on was to put people in their stores that weren't just salespeople, they were
Mhm.
like DJs,
Mm.
right? Well, if you
I see.
think about that, that's what Apple has done in their retail stores.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh, it was such a simple idea. Like, have people in the store that somebody walks in and says, man, like I love this kind of music. What do you think? Can you make a recommendation? Who's up and coming? Like, you could have done that. And it was such a simple thing, but they were like, our salespeople, they just need to like point you to where stuff is and then check you out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get
Right.
it. Yeah. Yeah. I think the hardest thing, the hill for me to overcome would be the obstacle would be to get out of the conservative engineering mindset
Mm-hmm.
and go towards what do I have to lose? Let me propose something outrageous. You never know, they
Yeah.
might buy it. And
Yeah.
when I say outrageous, I don't mean fair trade burgers, even though, some, but
Could be
you know what
I hadn't thought of that actually.
because in an industry where I'm from, where you're literally dealing with the specifics and You're focusing not just on depth, you're focusing on hyper depth. I'm
Mm-hmm.
literally trying to change my brain to a different, you know, dimension.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard. And if
Mm-hmm.
I think if I can get that, then I have a shot.
Yeah. But
And that's something that just has to, let's
work.
see.
Right. Right. Right.
um,
Well, and the other thing, Chandrani, you should think about is it's okay to say this is how an engineer would think about this.
yeah,
And then, but I don't know that that's sufficient. I don't know that that's going to get through to what the real problem is. I don't know that that's going to get, some expanded differentiation in the market.
right.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the difference. Like, I do that a lot because I was a finance person and then I
Mhm.
became a strategy person. It's like, okay, if we're just looking at this purely from the perspective of the net present value, we probably would make this decision. But if we take into consideration these other things, and that's valuable. So in the case, you just have to know where you are and which perspective that you're thinking from, and then, bring in a little bit broader perspective.
Yeah. Yes.
And if you start broader, but then also say, well, look, big picture, blah, 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 now the engineering view would also have to take this into consideration.
Hmm.
And I think
Yeah,
that
you're right.
that could be a very
That's a good
powerful.
strategy.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good strategy because that way it at least shows that I'm aware of,
Mm-hmm.
what the thought process is.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. I think I'm definitely going to use that if the opportunity affords itself.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that, yeah, this is how now, purely from an engineering point of view, this is how it worked. Like that brain teaser that I was given at that time, I went at it at a, mostly from a mathematical point of view until the aha moment of why would we want to cut this? I mean, are we crazy? 5%,
Yeah.
this can be a cash cow. So, and of course, he led me to it. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I came up with it, all that brilliant conclusion by myself. But because the point is, hey, he wants to know when you're going to get 5% return from that tree. You, like the good trained engineer that I am, you go in like a heat-seeking missile after the 5%. So,
Both.
we'll see.
Uh, Interesting. Okay. Well, let's work on a problem.
Okay.
I think you're gonna like this problem.
Okay.
Okay, Chandra. So let me give you some of this background.
Okay.
We are working with a company in the UK, and this company makes rechargeable batteries. The challenge that they've been facing is declining sales. They started slowly, maybe a couple years ago, and then the rate of decline has increased in the last couple of quarters. The client's specialization is rechargeable batteries that are used in forklifts.
Okay. Okay.
So, what that means is they have two types of customers. One is the OEM,
Mm-hmm.
the manufacturer of the forklift, and then the second is the suppliers of equipment so that when the battery needs to be replaced,
Like spares.
yes.
Okay.
The client has a reputation as kind of the high end innovator leader in the industry, which means they have products which are superior and higher quality. And they are looking for the root cause that is driving their declines, and then they are looking for a couple of very specific recommendations to reverse that sales decline.
Okay. Fascinating. When you think, you said batteries, and I started thinking, okay, double A batteries, nickel cadmium, double A, rechargeable, and then forklift. Okay, so that must be one big battery if it's going into operating forklifts. So, we normally don't think batteries and forklifts in the same sentence, basically, is what I was trying to say. So let me make sure I gathered all the facts. Our client is this UK-based company that makes rechargeable batteries for forklifts, and they their main clientele are OEMs who actually make the forklifts, and also spares suppliers who will supply the equipment, and they'll provide spare batteries for places or companies who are owners of forklifts already. Their sales have been dropping, and the rate of decline has accelerated over the last few quarters. Started slow, and then it's kind of really tanking now. So they are well known in the industry for being innovators. So they have a reputation, they make superior, good quality products. So they definitely like to understand why this decline in their revenue is happening, and then what key recommendations could be given to them to turn it around. Did I miss anything?
You have it correct.
Okay, so obviously this is. It sounds again. I'm still trying to just think of just the engineer in me. I'm trying to figure out how big would a battery be for a forklift, because forklifts are quite big, power machinery operated by personnel. I would think that the batteries, it's a specialized technology that is used to manufacture these batteries. So just from a technological point of view, I'm very curious to know like how they are different from, the mass scale batteries that we go and pick up at Walmart.
Uh,
So
it's probably like think about a car battery. Just
I see.
the energy that is produced by the battery is, yeah, the
I see.
technology is a little bit more. I don't know. I don't want to say advanced, but
Hmm.
it's got some.
Different.
It's different. It's a little bit more powerful because
Yeah.
because it's rechargeable. I mean, a car battery is sort of kind of rechargeable.
Okay.
These batteries actually have to be pulled out of the forklift after a
Yeah.
period of time
Sure.
and
Yeah.
recharged.
Yeah. Just from a safety point of view, I just don't see, because these batteries, if they're like car batteries, they probably need, for that kind of power, you essentially need to have, you know, the acid and the metal kind of large volumes, and there is, it's very difficult seems to be able to reach out that while it is, housed in that system. So, yeah, car battery is probably a nice way to draw an analogy. So, thanks for that. So, a couple of just quick questions off the top of my head before I dive into the structure. You mentioned the client is a high-end innovator and they have superior products. Now, are rechargeable batteries the only thing for forklifts, only thing they manufacture, or there is something else in the products that we should be thinking about?
This is exclusively their business, so
Okay,
they have no other products.
it's a very niche market, rechargeable batteries for forklifts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's their flagship product.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, all right. So that way we only have one thing to worry about. Then the other thing is now, since this is such a niche or specific market, are do they have competitors, and do we know anything about if this specific niche industry is seeing a decline? And I have some ideas about why this industry could possibly be declining, but I'll get to that in a moment. But like anything about, hey, rechargeable batteries for forklifts are in general now, or power tools or similar, they're now seeing a kind of a lull in business. Are we seeing any such global trends?
Um, the the industry as a whole is actually fairly stable and essentially grows at the same rate as GDP.
Okay.
So there aren't really any industry factors that we've been able to identify that might be stifling their growth.
I see.
Over the past, X number of years, X decades, there were
Okay.
about five or six main competitors in Europe.
Hmm.
There seems to be kind of a 5 or 6, and of late it's been more 6.
Okay. So basically, it seems like the industry is stable. So it's not like there is not a demand for this product anymore. There's definitely the demand is stable, and there are competitors, and it seems like the competitors who are making similar products are not seeing such a case, so like uh, effect on their revenue. It's only our client who is. So I think I'd like to probably, if I think about structuring this, I'd probably like to explore a couple of areas. One would be the companies. Obviously we can look at the finances and see if there was something like how they have declined over the last few years and quarters, and if there has been a particular inflection point in the company's management or quality of material being produced. So I'd like to explore, basically look into the company a little bit. The other area where I think I'd like to dive into a bit is their relationship with the OEMs and the suppliers. Like one of the things that could be is maybe these original equipment manufacturers maybe try to understand if they have acquired their own capability of making these batteries. That could be, maybe they started small, like had a pilot line, started the making few batteries or something, and eventually the OEMs themselves have a larger presence of their batteries, and then there, as a result, the decline has been even more steep. So I'd like to explore along those lines as well, and then those should at least give us some ideas as to which direction to look at, and then of course go with, once we identify a little bit more of a root cause as to why they are declining. Is it because their suppliers have gone away to other places, or building in-house capabilities, or even something like the government regulations for rechargeable batteries and the environmental factors have changed, so they have to think of alternate ways, such as actually operating the lifts on AC power or something like that. So once we understand those, then I can get towards actually making a few recommendations as to what they can do to turn the situation around. Does that sound reasonable?
It does.
Great. So I'm going to take just a minute to write some of the things that I spoke probably really fast. So as I mentioned, look at the way I would structure is I would say look at the company itself. Number one, has there been any decline in their manufacturing quality, or change even in management, their supply chain? So, or have their prices for some reason have suddenly gone up or something like that, which could be causing sales to decline, um, price and financial. So that I would all put under the company bucket. Then I'd like to look at the company's clients, or I'm going customers. I'd probably call that bucket as customers. Do they have building their own capability, their own battery supply, whether with a competitor or their own? So that could be an interesting area to explore, competitor or own in-house. That would be one. Then even, and the same goes for the suppliers. I'm assuming the sales have declined, or the revenue has stopped coming in from in a similar rate from both the OEMs and the suppliers. So that would be one area to look at. Then I'd probably look at some more like intangibles. Let's call that bucket. Basically, government or EPA environmental regulations against batteries in general. I mean, they are rechargeable, but at some point of time, the acid, the metals is corroded, the acid will stop performing, and that dynamo isn't going to work the same all the time, right? And so there may be a problem with disposing it or something. So we should look at some of along those lines. And then the next would obviously be, once we have some more information on this, I'd like to then nail down on the recommendations on how to turn this around, which would, once I get through some of these, and I'll get to exploring that area further.
Okay.
So uh, do we have any information? Has the company or client done any research on how things have been in-house, like their Has there been any decline in their manufacturing quality, supply chain, or turnaround, time to shipment, anything like that?
We don't have anything substantial. I mean, we've not really done any major changes in our manufacturing facilities. We haven't changed any major suppliers. We haven't, we have revised some of our products, but it's not like we've introduced a massive technology change in the batteries.
Okay. And there hasn't been an increase in complaints from the customers about the performance.
No.
Because at the end of the day, you're operating power equipment. Probably the two most important metrics to look at would be safety and performance.
Yeah.
So we touched upon performance. Seems like there hasn't been any. And while we are there, has there been any safety related issues, incidents related to our product?
No, our safety record is the best in class in the industry.
Okay. Nothing like an exploding battery in an operating forklift to
That sounds
kind of,
terrible.
yes, yeah, it sounds really bad. When I used to work for Intel, there's a crane and a forklift, which is the world's largest crane. It's a Swedish crane called Lamson. It has its own specialized crew, and they come to install fabrication facility structures. So these things are 600 feet tall and very imposing. So I'm
Wow.
thinking maybe that had a battery. How good could that be? Anyway, so getting back, so no performance issues, or at least no major change in the supply. There has been no safety issues, so that's good. Because those are safety issues normally hard to fix and it leaves a poor perception. Okay, so let's now perhaps move over to the customers, the company, our clients' customers. And do we have any information on if the customer is acquiring batteries from another source? Has there been a new competitor who's offering a better pricing? Do we have any information along those lines?
Um, we did just get some intelligence from our sales team. They have found that there has been one of the Portuguese companies that has apparently been growing quite substantially,
Mm-hmm.
um, and seems to be growing at a much higher rate of sales than anybody else in the industry, including our client.
Okay.
The other thing that they shared with us was some information about the product pricing.
Mm-hmm.
So, kind of our premium best selling battery,
Mm-hmm.
the price of that sells for about £1,500.
Okay.
And then it has a 5-year life. So before you essentially have to dispose of it, it will last for five
Okay.
years.
Okay.
This Portuguese company has a product in the marketplace that is £800 with
Okay.
a
Wow.
4-year life.
Okay. Wow. Interesting. That's you don't need to do the math to see that's strictly from a value point of view, that's so much better. Just by the numbers. We can obviously dig deeper. I see. Do we know anything else about this Portuguese company? I understand it's a relatively new entrant and it's growing faster than everyone else. Do we know anything about if they have a different technology or do we know how they're able to offer a product that's comparable lifetime, but so much, almost half the price of our product? Any intel?
By operating out of Portugal, they possibly have some cost advantages. The Portuguese market, there's a much higher rate of unemployment. Just in general, it's a lower cost economy than the UK. That could be a factor. Our client continually stands by the quality of their product, so they have a very hard time believing that the two products are comparable.
I see. Uh, there's one other question that I just thought of asking, and this kind of goes to the earlier portion when you said the sales have been declining and the rate of decline has accelerated in the past few quarters. For how long have the sales been declining overall? Like 1 year period, few quarters, 2 year, 3 year?
Well, maybe
Do
about
we
two
know?
years.
2 years.
It was
Okay.
slow at first. Could have been some
Okay. Okay.
macroeconomic factors in Europe,
I
but
see. I see. So because the reason I ask is you said that this competitor is offering products that have a 4 year battery life. I'm trying to understand that how long has this company been in business and have their products, do they have any products out there in the market that are actually through the 4 year lifetime? That's why. Like they say, okay, it's 4 years, but if all of their product is still new and it's still only, 2 years into its lifetime, does that kind of coincide with when the sales for this company started dropping? Because we still haven't seen a full product life cycle of this, Portuguese company's material. So that's kind of along the lines where I'm trying to go. But
um, I mean, I think that from what the sales team says, they've been in the marketplace maybe 4 or 5 years.
okay,
Um, it's hard to
okay,
know what the
okay. Okay, but it's safe to say that this company, it's probably we can, at this stage, I'm going to make a hypothesis that our company's sales are declining very likely due to this young and aggressive competitor who's offering the similar product for almost half the price. That's the hypothesis I'm kind of hoping, like, that's the hypothesis I'm forming right now. And the reason they are able to offer this product at low price, we discussed the economics of like the cost of manufacturing in UK versus Portugal, and that I was going to try to get a little bit more into that to see how that actually brings me to the financial portion of my bucket. Like, do we have any numbers on the cost of manufacturing our product and see if there is any way we can bring the cost down and take it from there?
our client has given us some of their financial information. I mean, we've looked at it, we've benchmarked it. They run a pretty lean ship.
Manufacturing.
And then, because they're sitting in more of a premium position,
Hmm.
a lot of their costs are built into R&D that, were they to, and then higher quality product materials.
Hmm.
So they're not having margin issues.
They're not having
They
margin
have they have
issues.
among the highest margins in the industry.
I see. Okay. So it's in order to bring their revenue up, cost is probably not the area to explore because it sounds like they're already well optimized there.
Hmm.
So the revenue probably is dropping because the number of units that are selling is declining.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, a few more questions while I kind of summon this out. We discussed that, okay, while we were on the customer side, like, yeah, we know that there's this new company and there is no other evidence of the manufacturers or the suppliers building stuff in-house.
Um, there is nothing that would indicate that they're doing that.
Okay. Then moving on to the intangibles I was mentioning, there hasn't been it. Now it sounds like there's probably not been any OSHA, EPA regulatory changes that would kind of impact the rechargeable battery market, because if that were the case, everybody would be impacted. So
Yeah.
now that I have that information, we can strike that out
Hmm.
if you agree.
I do.
Okay, great.
So,
Uh,
so Chandrani, we just got some information from the product team that
mhm.
I want to share with you that you might want to do some analysis of this and then see how it maybe fits into the line of inquiry that you have.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you some data,
Hmm.
and and it's a little bit much, so let me sort of walk through all of it.
Okay.
So one thing is operationally, just to make
Hmm.
sure that we have a common understanding of how forklift operations work.
Hmm.
So generally, most of the customers or most of the users of forklifts, they're running, large manufacturing plants, warehouses, they're moving things around, and the forklifts are running typically 24 hours a day.
Hmm.
And so the battery, when it runs out of a charge, it's replaced with a second battery.
Hmm.
And then the dead battery is essentially plugged into the wall to be recharged. That might be obvious, but just to be clear,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, there's value in reducing the amount of time that it takes to charge the battery, and then also by allowing the battery to run longer between charges. And the value actually has a monetary value because you use less energy, which has a cost associated with it.
Let me make sure I understand that last bit. Basically, we are saying that you want to minimize the amount of time to charge the battery, A, and B, you want to, in general, minimize the number of charges, or is that how I would interpret the second portion?
Yes, you could
Okay.
you could
So
take it. Yeah,
essentially run your car full of gas and you wait till you're almost running on fumes before you go and fill the gas. Because otherwise you're just going to the gas station
correct.
half
Correct.
gallon every time and it's killing your time. Is
Exactly.
that's the
Exactly.
okay, got it. Okay, got it.
So, with that context, this is some of the product specs that we got. So,
Okay.
the battery that our client produces, it runs for 12 hours
Mm-hmm.
and then it takes 8 hours to charge it.
Okay.
On the other hand, the competitor that we've been talking about, the Portuguese company, their battery runs for 10 hours and it takes 10 hours to charge.
Okay.
Okay, so if we assume that forklifts run on a 24-hour a day operation, we also know that on average across Europe, the cost of
Mm-hmm.
electricity is about 10 cents an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
then typically, most of these customers are running their operations about 350 days a year.
Okay.
So, given that, what can you learn about our battery compared to the competitor's battery?
Okay. So I think with these numbers we should be able to figure out if it is more, which battery is more cost efficient to run, ours or the competitors, or if we, so, and then see if the, like, that'll give us an idea if the competitors is more cost efficient, it's cheaper to run that, then that would be the reason why the customers are switching to that, not to mention the initial delta, the premium that they pay, about half of what our batteries cost. Does that sound
Yes.
fair?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to try to do some quick calculations based on these numbers. And I got the numbers as our client's batteries runs 12 hours, competitor 10 hours. Ours charges in 8 hours, theirs takes 10 hours. Electricity is 10 cents an hour, and whatever battery it is, it operates 350 days a year. So those are the 350 days a year is constant, and we don't even have to we may not even need to go to a yearly. I was going to try to do a daily cost of using these batteries to start with, and we can always scale it up to 350 days, which will be constant for both cases. So our battery, starting with our client, our battery runs for 12 hours. and then it needs to be charged for 8. So in a given day, if they are operating, well, 350 days a year, and can I assume that they're operating 24 hours in all of these 350 days?
Yes.
Okay. So in 24 hours, one battery will, or rather, in 24 hours, one forklift will need 2 batteries to perform to 100% efficiency. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 2 batteries. And at any time, you have the charging time is 8 hours. So at any time, you want to have one battery to be charging. I'm looking at just one forklift, right? So if you just think of one forklift, it starts at the beginning of the day. It has one battery. It runs for 12 hours. When it's done, you put the second battery in. In fact, we don't even need a third. Every forklift should be sustainable or should be able to operate 24 hours just based on one active and one charging.
Mm-hmm.
That I'll for the sake of operation calculations, I'll go with that assumption. So 10 cents an hour. So our client's batteries use up 80 cents for one charge, and the competitors uses up 100 cents per charge. Now, however, now I'm missing something here. Uh, the fact that ours can run 12 hours without being charged, right? I'm struggling to figure out how to incorporate that into my calculations. Let me think about this for a second. Runs for 12 hours and charges for 8 hours. So the efficiency of our battery is, no, that's not the way to look at this. Okay, we have to, if we multiply the cost of charging by the operating hours, so 80 times 12 versus 100 times 10, that may give me a more standardized metric as to how what the cost of operation is.
Okay.
So in that case, our clients is actually, it's cheaper to charge ours. It's 960 cents versus 1,000 cents, or well, $96 versus 1,000 for each of the batteries. So it's it's not the cost of charging that is causing. It's not cheaper to charge the competitor's battery compared to our clients. Is where I'm getting at.
Okay.
However, there is per battery, if it's $96 to charge and for the operating period versus the 100, if you add 1,500 to the original upfront cost versus the 800, each battery costs our competitor $1,800, while ours is 2,500 or $2,460. So overall, the customers have to pay almost $2,500 for the batteries compared to $1,800 for batteries, and that's one of the reasons why they're moving away.
Okay. So summarize what that means.
Um, I think the area to explore would, it's not so the regarding the battery, there's the cost of selling the battery, and then there's the cost of charging the battery. It appears to me, based on these calculations, that the cost of charging the battery and getting its max performance is comparable between our client and the Portuguese competitor. But the cost of producing the battery is significant, that that's basically what is driving the cost high enough. And that's why the customers are moving away towards the Portuguese option. I realized something else. Um, our our client's battery life is 5 years versus the competitors is 4 year lifetime. So we have to normalize, like divide our number by 5 and theirs by 4 to see what is the yearly cost.
Mm-hmm.
So if I do that, 1800 times 4 is 450, and ours is, of course, oh, it'll be almost break even, I think. 4. Still almost the same. It's a competitor is 450 versus ours is approximately 490 or so, give or take. So I'm trying, yeah, it's still cheaper to get batteries from the Portuguese competitor. And if I had to look in, I would have the company explore how to bring their manufacturing costs down. So start from there and then build upon some recommendations.
Why is bringing their costs down the only solution?
Uh, because upfront, it seems like every company is paying, like the customers are paying a premium to get this battery. But if I look at the performance of the battery, like, and performance means how long it can run and how long it takes to charge, it seems quite comparable compared to the competitor.
Is performance fixed?
Uh, I'm not entirely sure if I understand that. Could you elaborate?
What happens if the performance of the battery is improved?
Yeah, that's, well, that was going to be the second part of the recommendation. Like, if I could get, like, maybe if I when I have to make a summary, one of the areas would definitely be look towards bringing down the cost, and we have some ideas on how to bring the cost down. And then the second one would be if we can improve the keep the technology, but invest in or figure out how to improve the batteries performance, which would be either increase the running time or reduce the charging time, or both. Essentially, widen the gap between those two. Right now, the competitor, for every 10 hours the battery runs, it needs to charge for 10. And we already have a bit of an advantage that it can run 12 hours and then charge for 8 hours. But our initial production cost is high enough that it offsets that performance advantage. So we have to figure out how we can widen that margin, invest, or figure out if there is a technology or improving the technology that can do so.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So why don't you summarize, Chandrani, what
Okay.
you found and give kind of the synopsis of the recommendation?
Okay. So our client, who's a UK-based company specializing in rechargeable batteries for forklifts, has seen a decline in sales, which has accelerated over the recent past. And over by looking at various areas, including worldwide supply, their demand, the company's area, supply chain, we've established that it's not a problem with the industry, but it's specifically related to our client. We also identified that there is a new entrant, a Portuguese competitor, who is growing very fast. And it appears that they are able to offer a product that delivers comparable performance, but costs almost half as much. So in order to turn their revenues around, our client should be looking at, number one, to certainly reduce their manufacturing costs. I understand they are lean, but perhaps they can look into moving some of their operations overseas, or seeing wherever the economy is more favorable to manufacture these at a lower cost. That's one. Then number two would be actually improve the performance of the battery by trying to improve the running time and or reduce the charging time of the battery so that they can widen that gap and offset some of their costs for the expensive product with uh, even better performing material, even better performing product.
Good. Okay. Let's discuss. I'm making a couple notes. What do you think?
I messed up the math and I'm still not clear why. I have to think about it. It's something there. I know I messed up the math, but I
Yeah.
just can't figure out what it is. And it's bothering me so much.
So, partially, it's the essentially you're overcomplicating the math, right?
Okay.
The battery runs 12 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a 24-hour period of time, it will need to be
Mm-hmm.
recharged twice.
Mm-hmm.
Each of those charges takes 8 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So, in any one given day, you're charging for 16 hours
Yep.
times 10 cents a charge.
Mm-hmm.
On the other
No,
hand,
10 cents per hour. So it's 160 cents.
yeah.
Okay.
On the other
And the
hand,
other
the competitor battery, it
is 10
runs
hour.
10 hours. So technically in a day, you have to do 2.4 charges of 10 hours each times 10
Mm-hmm.
cents per hour. So
Yeah.
when you do the math,
240 cents.
yeah. And then the ideal, so this math you actually want to annualize. You want
Mm-hmm.
to put
So
everything in
multiply
annual
by three.
terms because that way you can then break down the per year cost on the purchase, and
Okay.
you get an basically an annual cost per year.
Yeah.
And when you
Okay.
all said and done, the client's the competitor's battery is more expensive on a per year basis.
But don't we want it to be the other way around?
Well,
Don't we want the competitors like battery to be cheaper? That's why they're going away.
what's happening is people are only looking at the purchase price. They're not looking at the total cost of operating the battery on an annual basis.
I see.
So they're buying the $800 battery
Because it's cheaper.
because it's cheaper,
Yeah.
but it's costing them $840 a year for electricity.
Mm-hmm.
Our battery is $300 a year, but it only costs $560 a year for electricity. So what they're doing is they're, making a one-time purchase that seems cheaper, but it's actually $180 per year more expensive, the competitor's battery.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the issue, in fact, is that the client has a marketing problem.
I see.
The product is actually better,
Mm-hmm.
but this is all that the buyer is focused on is the
I
one
can't
time.
believe the buyer, the clients are not calculating how much energy consumption is occurring by these batteries.
Well, no.
So,
So here's the thing: what you when you do this math, this isn't the
mhm,
client's issue;
right.
it's the customer's issue, and it could be that the sales team isn't communicating.
Yeah.
You also have a middleman, so
Mhm.
the customer buys from an OEM. The customer buys a replacement battery. So
Mhm.
if the OEM and the supplier of the replacement battery aren't talking about how much better the client's battery is,
Hmm.
and they may be buying the battery from the competitor more cheaply, right? So when you look at the sales channels, what you have is an intermediary that potentially could be diluting the sales,
Yeah.
right? And if the market's really competitive, it might benefit that intermediary to have a cheaper product because they can push it better.
Hmm. Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out the math, and I, I think I should have probably spent some more time just thinking a little bit more because I knew it was there. I just couldn't
Yeah.
grasp it, and
Yeah.
then I started to
But
panic
but
that.
it's turning it around and kind of thinking about it from the end user perspective,
Hmm.
right? So it's like buying a car. You buy a car, you buy a certain kind of a car, you think it's cheaper, but then, every 2,000 miles something breaks on it and you have to spend money fixing it.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's better to pay a little bit more for a nicer car and then you don't have
Yeah,
to spend as much on maintenance,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
Hmm.
But I think the thing is always to remember the trick about these this math is it's not tricky math. It's knowing what orientation
Yeah,
to use for the math.
yeah, yeah. I knew it even when I was doing it because I knew it that I wasn't doing it right, but I just couldn't get it at that time, like what piece I'm
Mm-hmm.
missing.
Mm-hmm. But beyond that, um, I mean, overall, I really liked your approach. I mean, I think you felt to me very confident. You asked some good questions.
I was really trying to go for the breadth and I screwed up the depth.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I mean, this is
Hopefully
like a
in the
pendulum.
interview,
Yeah.
hopefully in the interview I'll get both of them right.
Yeah.
Because I was really trying to, you know, instead of just focusing on the battery technology, I was trying to ask the intangibles like, okay, have there been a regulation change? Maybe the competitors, like the customer is making their own, that kind of stuff, like instead of just the obvious, maybe a bigger scenario. And it's hard because you want to go straight after that technology and dive into, hey, are they working all right? So,
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple of like little things.
yeah,
So when you are learning at the very start, like as much as it's interesting to sort of visualize how big the battery is,
hmm,
I'd want to know how it works.
I see.
So how does these batteries work? What are the dimensions of performance?
Mm,
Right? It's like anything mechanical, right? Sensors, hard drives, batteries, refrigerators, wheels, right? They all have performance dimensions.
yeah, performance metrics.
I would
Yeah,
get that out real quick
I
because
see.
then you get a very
Got
good
it.
sense of kind of the lay of this land.
Got it.
Um, the second thing, try not to make too many assumptions.
Okay.
So at the start, I think you kind of made the comment that maybe the competition hasn't had any revenue declines. That's sort of isolated to our client. We don't know that until you ask that question. Um, the
Sorry, say that again. Say that again.
so I
I'm
think
trying to.
I think one of the things when you were getting some of your questions out and I was answering them, once you asked if there was decline in the industry, I think I heard you say, well, this must mean that the competitors haven't had any revenue declines.
I
Like,
see. Okay.
like we don't
Got
know
it.
that. We don't know that yet, right?
Okay.
I think another point you made was, well, a competitor's product is similar. Well, what is similar, right? If it doesn't run as many years, if it takes longer to charge, if it's not the same quality, it's technically not a similar product,
Okay.
right?
I think,
So,
yeah, I may have meant that more in terms of the core technology, like lead acetate battery
but
or
we don't even
whatever,
know that,
I see. Okay.
right?
Hmm.
So in this technical, I mean, I don't know anything about batteries, trust me. Um, but I don't think you can make that assumption that it's even the same
Okay.
technology. Like, and the
Okay.
the technology here doesn't. I mean, it kind of matters, but it doesn't.
Okay.
And then one just sort of little note for your thinking. So when you and I kind of pushed you on this a little bit. When you got to your recommendations, two things I want you to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
When you start talking about potential solutions,
Mm-hmm.
don't sort of drop one out there, right? So because many interviewers will do what I did, right? Well, you're dropping out. Well, they should reduce their cost. Well, what else? Like, so what you want to do is you want to say, I have a couple of ideas. Let me tell you the first two, and then let
Okay.
me explain them. Because what happens is the interviewer starts evaluating what's missing.
I see.
Okay. The second thing, and this is a little bit of a harder idea. When you present your recommendations,
Uh-huh.
there's a logic in the sequence.
Yes.
So one area of logic is like time horizons, right? Could be short term, medium term, long term. Another sequence is risk. Easy to implement, little less easy, really hard, and each of those has an increasing level of risk. Okay. A third dimension is sort of alignment, and this is a little bit harder. It's like alignment to the client's strategy. So this client is a premium, high tech player in the marketplace. If I was sitting down with them, I wouldn't talk about cost focused recommendations first.
Okay.
I would go into places internally first, like maybe we need to do something around the marketing front and the R&D front, and
I see.
then because typically when you're driving cost out of the business, you're not the premium player unless your product has matured to us. I mean, they would have to drive out costs, don't get me wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but so in this scenario, by driving out cost, it would mean that they could drop their price. Strategically, a premium player wouldn't want to drop their price.
Right.
So you can kind of go there as the second, like it could be that they come up with a private label brand for their non OEM channel, for the secondary, aftermarket channel. And that would be, they would then really have to be much more honed in on their cost, right? But in their primary channel, in their OEM channel, they need to stay as a premium product. So the question is, how do you do that?
Hmm.
So you either
Yeah, I
need
mean,
like massive value add, you need to improve the performance, you need some other dimension to kind of justify that, $1,500 price point.
hmm.
Unless they're just, crazy and they're priced out of the market.
Yeah, it's I mean change your cost is always you know, it's the
Mm-hmm.
safest thing to fall back on essentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like the you have those beauty pageants and what do you want, world peace? But then if you don't say that, that means you missed the obvious thing.
Yeah.
So I guess
Yeah.
that's why everybody will put it out there as a like a CYA, right?
Yeah. And it could be in there. I would just make it the second thing or the third
Right.
thing,
Makes sense. Makes sense. I get
right?
it. Yeah.
Now, some of the other dimensions I think were great and very noticeable, like good energy, really great demeanor, just good, kind of just a good path of inquiry.
Hmm. Okay, good.
Um, you're like you're thinking through these problems, Chandrani. I mean, I think, and I think I told you this before. Don't overthink.
Okay.
And continue to draw the analogies. I mean, in a case like this is really helpful. I mean, I don't know, I don't know lots about batteries, but I think about mobile phones. There's the
Yeah.
high-end mobile phone and the cheap mobile phone, and
Right. Right.
one has a higher processor and more memory. The other one doesn't. You know, and if I'm losing share, then clearly there's like my segment, I'm out of line with what my segment's expectations are.
Hmm.
And then there's some math to sort of prove that.
Yeah.
That's all it is,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
But I think your progression, you have moved up the learning curve. Like it's very obvious to me that you have a much greater command of how you're thinking about these problems.
Okay. Good. I do know that in the first case or first two cases or something, I was more formal, treating it more as an oral viva, like an exam, as opposed like, in the good old days, again, come from India, British education system.
Of course.
You have your oral practical exams in the lab where you have to go, they ask you the question, you answer, you demonstrate your lab technique, you wait till they ask you again, and it was just very formal. And I know that the first one, two cases, and also, well, I read Case in Point, and I was following that to the T. Well, repeat everything, make sure you don't miss anything, write things down pretty, blah blah, make a framework right away. So after getting that feedback from you, I tried my best to ask the questions up front before. Okay, the framework can wait, and at least let me ask some questions so that it shows that I'm engaging instead of following mechanical set of guidelines. And
Yeah. I mean,
while I was writing it, I was like the buckets and the framework. Okay, like okay, let's when you're looking at the company, looking at the so those came from that feedback I received. But as I said, in the course of doing that, it's like I knew I was screwing up the math. I just didn't know what I was screwing up.
yeah. I mean, the thing is, it's an ongoing process, and what you just hope is that, frankly, when you're doing the interview, that you
Yeah,
just put all the pieces together,
yeah,
But,
yeah.
like,
Like it
but
was
don't,
very enlightening to watch those two videos, the good and the better,
yeah,
because I know I was doing the good, and then I knew that what I had to do to be better. So that's so that made sense.
yeah. And just, remember that, like, frameworks are really simple. Like, this is a framework that I put together for some stuff I'm doing up at Kellogg.
Hmm.
It's like, okay, this is how we would research a company. You should look at their history, you should look at their current business, you should look at their future, right? That's a
I
framework.
mean, essentially, it's nothing more than a logical list of questions to
Mhm.
ask. That's basically what it is, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So, if
Okay.
you do that and then you apply this like natural curiosity and just, think about it as sitting down with a colleague to work on a business problem.
Yeah.
and know that you're supposed to ask questions and know that you're supposed to probably do some kind of analysis, and it's not a formal exam, it's a discussion, you're going to be in great shape.
Let's hope so.
Simple. Right? It's so simple.
Sure.